What's good, y'all? We are back with part 2 of the RWBY and Justice League crossover, and right off the bat, I want to say that I had a lot of fun watching this movie and enjoy this one way more than part 1. It definitely benefits from being a follow-up movie, you don't have to spend time like building relationships or having characters unaware of events just so the audience can follow along. And honestly, the characters are what this movie excels at, because there are some beautiful moments between the two teams. I'm so glad we're still focusing on how the fall of Atlas is affecting Weiss, and connecting that with Batman makes it all the more better since they're the two with probably the most love for where they came from, even though their both respective areas have this corrupt undertone to both places. Then, I love how they also connected Yang and Flash's trauma of being completely helpless and hurt, and how that can mess with your mentality, and how just going through a difficult situation like that is not something you can just get over easily. Having Yang give pieces of advice like that really just shows how strong she is to deal with those problems and yet still be there for those that need her and herself. Then, of course, you have RWBY, who, coming off of the events of Volume 9, is acting like she's got something to prove, making her a bit more reckless, and this leads to some amazing and much needed sisterly moments with Yang, and talks about leadership and expectations with Clark. Plus, there are smaller things mentioned that I love fill out the RWBY universe. Things like mentioning how people in Vacuo are very against receiving help from Schnees, or even mentioning Dr. Moreau when they talk about people with the ability to tamper with Grimm, giving Grimm Eclipse a shout out. Stuff like that just shows good writing, because they know your mind is already looking out for these things, so they need to at least touch on them. Now, if only we could do that in the main show as well, but, baby steps. Overall, it's way more of a concise story that allows the characters to be at their best without being held down by some parts of the story that feel like they were added just for artificial tension like in part 1. I don't know the production time between both parts to know if they actually took that criticism to heart, but it really feels like they did. Or at the very least, just needed to get that first part out of the way to start cooking so they could go all in on what a crossover like this could be. Also, side note, I love how Watts escaping the fall of Atlas is basically a huge middle finger to Cinder and shows that she still can't outplay him no matter what. The only problem I would say I have with this movie, besides Wonder Woman's face, because that thing is the stuff of nightmares, is that Blake doesn't have her own character moment, like literally every other member of the team does. I, like many others, thought that in-depth exploration would come in the form of her mystical eels. It seemed like a pretty straightforward thing to touch on, or even just slightly mention beyond a quick joke. Now, I never really had a problem with her not having ears in the first place, and thought it was just insane the way people were acting about it, but Twitter gonna Twitter. Either way, it just seemed like an obvious thing that could have happened, but I'm not really bothered by it for the reason you might think. The real problem for me is that it's continuing a trend you see in the show where it feels like one member of a team always gets the short end of the stick. For Juniper, that person would be Noah. For Coffee, it's Yatsu until the second book. For Team Sun, it's Sage. It's such a repeated thing that it's always stuck out to me, and it felt way more apparent watching everyone else get these emotional, meaningful scenes, but nothing coming up for Blake. And watching the show, I do think they were aware of this, but for some reason it's just slow to change, which is what makes it even more infuriating. Now, if there was any other thing I would say bad about this movie, and this one is extremely nitpicky, so don't take it too seriously, but I found it strange to include some of the villains helping them when you have countless other Justice League members that you could have brought in, some of which were even actively mentioned by name like Green Arrow. All I'm saying is, it was kinda weird seeing Killer Croc save a child, but it was such a small thing and didn't detract from my enjoyment of the movie at all, so really it's fine. And that's pretty much what I think. Like I said, it was an enjoyable movie and a great improvement over the first part. Now that this is done and watched, we're most likely not going to get any new RWBY until we get something for Volume 10. And I know right now there's a lot of people who have gone straight into doom posting mode and are freaking out that it'll never happen, but I'm choosing to be optimistic. Y'all know I watch a lot of anime, so I'm used to long hiatuses and not hearing anything for a while, only to be surprised by an announcement down the road. as long as the Phantom is alive, there will always be a possibility for more. So just have a little bit of faith. That is probably what this series is about after all. So with that said, let me know what you thought of part 2, or maybe even your hopes for volume 10 and down the line, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.